Alright guys, what's going on, and welcome to your 11th, as I believe it is, Android tutorial. Now, this tutorial, we're going to start a new area of Android called the Fragment. Now, the Fragment was only introduced in Android 3, or Honeycomb, and that's the tablet version of Android, because the Fragment was needed. We'll get into why the Fragment was brought in, but the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to add the Compatibility Library to our app. And you have to do this or your app won't even work. So if you right click on the app project and go down to Android Tools, add Support Library, and it'll fetch it and add it to the app. Now what this is, if you haven't done it already, I might have shown you to do this already, but the Fragment is not available in Android 2. Now as you know, let's cancel X, I've already got that. But the Fragment is not available in Android 2, it's in Android 3.0 and later, but we're developing our app for Android 4, it's okay. But we want it to be backwards compatible down to Android 2. Now in order to do that we have to make sure that the Fragments work on Android 2, because the Fragment is a major design change for the entire app. So, how we're going to do this is, or what is a Fragment essentially is the first thing we're going to ask. A Fragment is essentially a reusable piece of UI and the code for it. That's essentially how I define a fragment. Now what a fragment actually means, or what it's used for, is if you've got an app on the phone and you've a list of buttons on the phone, okay, and then you press a button, as you've seen already, we press the hello world button or whatever it was, or the press me button, and it brings up a new activity with the edit texts, and that was giving the text back to us as we entered it. That's fair enough. But on a tablet, that'll look all stretched out and it'll look all bland. What if we could make it so that when we press the button, it would make the edit text appear, they would appear side by side. In other words, we'd have one kind of activity essentially, one of our old activities beside the other one. But we can't do that because on Android each screen is an activity. So this is where the Fragment comes in. What we're going to do is we're going to encapsulate the functionality of the UI, of the activity, into a fragment. Now there are 3 laws of fragments. Fragments cannot exist on their own, they have to be part of an activity. Fragments have their own UI, their own control, and the fragment lifecycle is tied to the activity lifecycle. Remember how we covered on pause, on stop, on destroy? Well, the fragment is essentially its own UI section put in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our fragment. We're going to create one fragment and we're going to use our main activity. And this new activity, we're actually going to eliminate most of this code here and put it in a fragment. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new fragment, new class, and we're going to call it fragment. I don't know, we'll just call it a fragment or side fragment. And we're going to go to browse, going to look up fragment. Now see the way here, look, android.app, we don't want that. We want the android support.v4.app. This is where the fragment code has to come from. If we bring it from android.app, it'll work on 16 devices, but it'll crash on 2. So we're going to select OK. So that's our superclass. So that extends the fragment. Now one thing we have to be aware of is that in Android there was a big change made to the activity at Android 3 as well, because to allow for the fragments to be locked, to be attached to activities, as fragments do, they link onto the activity itself and tie into its life cycle, the activity was changed. And of course if we go in with a regular activity and it tries to load a fragment, it'll go and crash. So how you get around this is you actually have to remember how everything extends base activity. So this extends activity, so we actually need to make this extend fragment activity, and we import fragment activity and we unimport that. Essentially fragment activity is an extension of activity that allows for fragments. Essentially everywhere, if you're using a fragment in an activity, you have to have fragment activity if you're using the support package for developing for Android 2. This is getting a little bit crazy, I know. Okay, so we've got our fragment. So the first thing we want to do is we want to initialize our UI. So we're going to use the same UI from our new activity. You know, we might as well. So how a fragment actually creates its UI, it's actually the call is @override as usual for overriding. and it's going to be public view, and it's going to be on create view bundle saved instance state. Okay, and then we create our brackets. Now we have to return a view. Let me just look this up now. I'm not this view on create view always gives me trouble myself in my head, so I'll be back in just a second when I solve it. Okay, so what I did was I actually took the code out of another thing. The on create view is actually much more complex than this. That's what it is. This is how you create the fragment. It's on create view. You need a layout inflator, you need a view group container, and you need a bundle saved instance state, or a bundle. They're the 3 parameters it takes. That's just the way Android is. It's like the way it takes a bundle and on create. It just does that. So that's our interesting thing. Now, on create view, we need to inflate a layout. Okay, so a fragment is essentially a view with code tied into it. On activities, you just set the view and it inflates the layout, but this we have to actually manually inflate the layout into the view. So we're going to create our view. Now this is because we're going to need the view parameter later, and we're going to say view is equal to inflator. Actually, I'll just take a shortcut. Dot inflate XML resource view group root. So what's our layout going to be? This is essentially our layout. So we're going to go down here to res, we're going to layout. So it's going to be called or.layout new activity dot layout dot new activity, and our root is our container, and our last parameter is actually false. I'm actually clicked in here, that's all it's annoying, is false. Okay, now we need to return a view because that's the way Java works, so we're going to say return view. Return view. And that's our fragment. Done and dusted. Now, the thing is we need to actually get this into an activity. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that in the next video. This fragment series is going to be about maybe 5 to 6 videos because fragments are a little bit difficult to understand, but we'll make it work somehow. But we're going to add, in the next video, we're going to add the fragment to the activity. And we're going to we'll show you how to add it with XML files, we're going to show you how to put it in layouts, we're going to show you how to add it programmatically. And then from there, we're going to then add our button controls, our edit text controls, and we'll have it working on multiple devices. So we'll have a version for tablets with the two screens side by side, and then we'll have a version for phones where the screens are behind one another. So remember guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, this has been your 10th Android tutorial.